Michael Freeman, who is a councillor at the Embassy of Israel in London. It's very good of you to come in. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
The big question, I suppose, Michael, is this, that when the President couches this decision in terms of helping the peace process, lots of people we've spoken to today, including in East Jerusalem, say, well, they cannot see the logic of that. So what can you say to that?
Well, I think it does help the peace process, and I think it does take it forward. And I think it does so for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it recognises the reality that for Israel, Jerusalem is our capital, that it's been the centre of the Jewish world for 3,000 years. On top of that, it's since 1949, Jerusalem has been our capital. It's where our legislature is, it's where the Supreme Court is, it's where when foreign leaders choose to come to Israel, they go to Jerusalem to meet with us. And on top of that, every diplomat who comes to Israel and presents their credentials presents them in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is the de facto capital, and it recognises the reality that Jerusalem is the capital. It also puts to bed the pernicious myth and this violent dream from some people that they can expel the Jews from Jerusalem, that the Jews aren't going to be there and the Jews don't have a home there. We've got a 3,000-year-old continuous history there. And finally, the Palestinians say that they have given up any claim on any part of Israel before 1967. Well, Jerusalem, as I said, has been the capital since 1949. So I think that what this does is it allows us to go forward in a new paradigm. For 20 years we've been trying to do the same things, and this is a fresh approach and a new approach, and I think that when the dust settles, this will indeed allow us to move forward in the peace process.
You've expressed that very clearly, and I would come back and say it's not really an answer to how it pushes the peace process forward if you have, as potential peace partners, people who are vehemently opposed to this decision. How on earth does that work? How do you bridge that divide?
Well, I would say to those people, we need to sit around a table and have negotiations. They may be opposed, but they claim that they have got no claim to any part of Israel pre-1967, and Jerusalem's been the capital since 1949. So I would say to them, let's sit round a table, let's have conversations, let's have negotiations, because a conflict can only be resolved with the two sides sitting and talking to each other. And those people who are the radicals and the extremists, we can't let them set the tone. It needs to be set by the moderates, and I would hope that the moderates will move this process forward.
After the initiative in 1993, there was a view at that time, which has persisted, that the status of Jerusalem was still formally unsettled or unconfirmed, that would have to wait until the very end of the peace process. What's changed? Why is that not necessary anymore?
Well, the Palestinians can absolutely bring the status of Jerusalem to the negotiating table. That's one of the issues that they can bring. We will bring our issues. We obviously believe that the status of Jerusalem should remain united and it should remain sovereign under our sovereignty. And we have good reason for saying that. And one of the reasons is that Jerusalem is the centre to the three main monotheistic religions, as well as many other religions. And the only time in history that those religions have had freedom of worship, have been able to go to their places of worship, and those places of worship have been run and had the guardianship by those individual religions. So Jews running the Jewish sites, Christians running the Christian sites, Muslims running the Islamic sites, is under Israeli sovereignty. And I think that, especially as we look at the Middle East now, that's something that we should be saying thank you to, it's something we should be encouraging, and it's something that we should move forward. And so I think that's the reason. And the other reason is there are 200,000 Arab residents of East Jerusalem. And poll after poll after poll in the last number of years, when they've been asked, do you want to remain under Israeli sovereignty or under the sovereignty of a Palestinian state, every time the vast majority say they want to stay under Israeli sovereignty. So I think we also need to take into account their views as well.
Does it bother you in any way when you look at the response overnight? You look at a wide range of response from France to Saudi Arabia to the Pope to the UN Secretary General. They've all been, without exception, very negative about this initiative of President Trump's. Does that bother you?
Well, I think there is an international norm that says every country in the world gets the right to choose its own capital. And every other nation chooses its capital. In fact, some nations have changed their capital.
And that's what the Palestinians want to do as well, of course.
And so I would say to the world, we have the right to also name our capital, and our capital is Jerusalem. So I would hope that the rest of the world would recognise that. And I think over the coming days there will be more states that will recognise and will follow in America's footsteps. And I think that's a positive development.
Viewers today will see some of the scenes in the West Bank and Gaza and Jerusalem, and they'll listen very carefully to your words, and they'll say, well, talk of building a peace process or progressing it with these kinds of scenes happening after the president's announcement, it's difficult to believe that that is the case. What would you say to them?
Well, there's no excuse for violence, and I think that we need the Palestinian Authority to stop inciting violence and to start encouraging moderation. I think that they need to speak to their people and say to them, we need to have negotiations and we need to calm down, because it can't be that international policy is held to a small group of radical extremist terrorists like Hamas that call for the destruction of Israel. We saw them earlier. They call for the destruction of Israel. They call for the death of all Jews worldwide. And they don't need an excuse. They believe that everybody should die who is Jewish or Israeli. And they don't need an excuse.
But to moderate Palestinians who sincerely believe that this is a move that sets them back, what would you say?
Well, I would say to the moderate Palestinians, I would say, I believe in peace, I want peace. I would hope that you want peace. Let's sit round a table and let's negotiate peace. I would say to you, come to the table. I would say to them, the only way this conflict can be resolved is through face-to-face negotiations. There hasn't been a conflict that's genuinely been resolved without having face-to-face negotiations, and that has to be the way forward. So I would say, come talk, let's find that historical compromise that will allow us to live side by side in peace.
Mr. Freeman, good of you to come in.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot. Michael.